I suppose the first page of the Scully report, any of us who are following this, and I won't be able to cover a quarter of the issues I want to talk about today in 10 minutes, but the first page of the Scully report we could have written, systemic system failure. We all knew that in many ways, from those of us, particularly I've been in the Health Committee and in the PAC. But systemic system failures happen because people either make decisions or don't make decisions. It's a human enterprise. It's not something that happens from on high. So we have to find out why it happened. Who did or did not make decisions? Or who acted in certain ways that we ended up where we are today? And only for the bravery of Vicky Phelan, we would not be talking about this today, colleagues. It's absolutely incredible. I want to acknowledge her, Stephen Teep, Lorraine Walsh and everyone else. I've spoken to so many people on this, many of whom don't want to be named. I welcome Scully. I welcome his frankness most of all. I've spoken to him on a number of occasions since. I welcome his frankness. But, Minister, this was a scoping inquiry. So it isn't a full report. It's nowhere near it. The issues are too large. So it is not of that scale. It is limited, but it is excellent in its findings. And I believe that the 50 recommendations, absolutely above everything else, are the priority for all of us in this House, and everything else is secondary. The 50 recommendations have to be implemented. Obviously, the move to HPV vaccine, which is something that is a priority. Minister, you need to resource the labs. You need to resource the personnel to be able to implement that, and obviously follow the resolution that I had passed here with my Labour colleagues in the Dáil in relation to moving it onto boys to create herd immunity. The issue of non-disclosure is dealt with, is going to be dealt with, and has to be a priority. The issue in relation to loss of trust between clinicians and their patients, it's been spoken about an awful lot. I don't want to dwell on it except to say it was absolutely enlightening. And I think it's something that the medical profession and lots of different medical representative bodies need to reflect on, not just in this area but across a number of other areas as well. One part of this which I do feel does need to be looked into is the fact that many of these clinicians, colleagues, met during this, and it wasn't known until we pulled out the minutes of colposcopos meetings that took place in the middle of this crisis, when it wasn't known to the public. So clinicians were aware there was a serious issue here, but the actions or the urgency wasn't in it. And we need to find out why that is and why that was. We have structural issues here, Minister, in relation to the HSE. As I said before, they happen because people did or did not make decisions. So, in any investigation, and I believe it's gone beyond the debate that we will have some form of inquiry or investigation. I believe it should be short. I believe it cannot get in the way of any recommendations. I believe it should have tight terms of reference. But in any investigation, we need to find out who did what, when, where and why, and how in relation to the HSE cervical check, and indeed possibly your own department. There is a jigsaw in relation to where we're going on the whole area of cervical cancer. Obviously the priority is the recommendations. Obviously the priority is HPV. Obviously the priority is herd immunity and moving to boys. That is one component of it. Second component of it is the OCORG review in relation to the slides. That's critically important. Third is the issue in relation to Judge Meehan's work. Let me say this, Minister, I don't actually hold you accountable to this. I hold your Taoiseach accountable to this. On more than one occasion, the Taoiseach did not know what he was talking about. He did not know what he was talking about on 6-1 News, when he said that basically the women affected would not have to go through the courts and that the labs would be chased and they would settle with the women. He was wrong. I knew the second he said it, he was wrong. He's consequently come out and he met with Vicky Phelan. And Judge Meehan's review, or what he's doing, the work, is in two components. The broader components in a number of months' time, but his first findings will be in a couple of weeks. I don't believe that the judge actually can achieve a huge amount by making recommendations. So the Taoiseach has overpromised a second time. I find it almost impossible to see a scenario where women will not end up in the courts again, and that is disgraceful. So please bring that message back to the Taoiseach. The fourth component of the jigsaw is what we need to discuss in the coming weeks as regards investigating the whole issue of who did what, where, when and how in the HSE and other organisations, the issue relating to a forum to deal with what clinicians did or didn't do, and in particular the manner in which they behaved. And thirdly, there are elements relating to how contracts were managed with the labs. I'm delighted with what Scally said in relation to the labs. It helps you, dare I say it, and all of us in Ireland to ensure we have a screening programme, and we all have to behave responsibly into the future to have a screening programme. So I welcome that. But we do need to ensure that there is an investigation into how these contracts were managed or not managed. I'll get back to that. I do want to deal with one point before I move on to the labs, and it's this, is that over the summer there was some commentary, reverse commentary almost, revisionism almost, in relation to the purpose of some of the work that was being done by many people who were affected here, and that in some way pursuing justice and their legal rights in some way as a consequence was damaging the future of screening. That was wrong to be insinuated by many people. It was wrong, and it affected people who actually ensured that this became public in the first place. And that revisionism, as far as I'm concerned, needs to stay where it is now and not come back on, because the likes of Vicky Phelan, Stephen Teep, Lorraine Walsh, I know these people, colleagues. Their number one priority here is not self-interest. They have families, or in the case of Lorraine, she doesn't because of this. Their number one priority is future screening and the future generations of this country, my children and everyone else's. That is their number one priority. In relation to the labs, I welcome what Scally has said in relation to the labs, but I do have some questions. The manner in which the contracts were managed by the HSE, the laissez-faire manner in which these contracts were managed by the HSE needs to be investigated. We know of 221 cases, situations, Minister. I want to ask you a question. In any other walk of life where there's errors, and there's accepted errors in some cases, we all know that in some cases negligence has to be proven and all of that, but in some cases we know what's happened. Has Cervical Check, the HSE, actually investigated what has happened in these cases? It's such a simple question. It was so obvious that it doesn't occur to people. Have they, as of now, today, and we know of cases, they're quite public, have they been investigated? In any scenario where a public body has issues like this, surely they go and investigate what has happened. Surely they look at their contracts and investigate what has happened in each and every case. Surely they look for patterns. Surely they look into all of this. And I'm raising those very questions with you, Minister, deliberately. We have a situation here where Scally provided new information, which is very welcome, in relation to CLP and in relation to the outsourcing that happened to other labs across the jurisdiction of the United States, which was not allowed for. How did the HSE Cervical Check not know this? Who was monitoring it? Or who wasn't monitoring it? Who wasn't doing their job? This isn't acceptable. We've had scenarios here now where there was a service which was run, Cervical Check, where there was contracts in place, where we know now that there was outsourcing happening that they didn't know about. We know now where there has been errors and issues in relation to how women were dealt with. And I'm not sure to this moment who in the HSE has been investigating this, who has gone through the contracts, whose job it was to look at the contracts, and whose job it was to ensure quality assurance was happening because it wasn't. And that is a component of an investigation, along with who does what, did what, where and when in the HSE, along with the other issues I've identified earlier on, while we will need some form of inquiry, Minister, to be agreed. And I do feel that it should be agreed, consequent to you and I and others meeting with the patient advocates and those who have been a victim of this and who have obviously been referenced earlier on in the next 2 weeks or so. Thank you.